Continuous exposure to sensational news and content can overload our cognitive systems. In other words, a small dose of social media is not a cognitive hazard, but taking too much of it creates a poisonous effect. As a result, it's important for us to be aware that such a phrase, cognitive hazards, becomes because it helps us navigate the modern information landscape more safely. We all know that we are what we eat. If we eat healthy, then we have a healthy body. If we eat unhealthy or drink poison, then we become unhealthy. We do have to be thoughtful about information diets, and we need to eat more of the healthy content out there and limit our exposure to potentially harmful content. Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. Did you know that you can get a free business class trip to Japan every year with HeyMax AI? HeyMax is a rewards app where 500 brands like Apple, Shopee, Amazon, Agoda, and even banks reward you for your loyalty by contributing towards your dream vacation. Through the HeyMax app, every transaction you make earns you Max Miles, which you can redeem for free travel at more than 25 airline and hotel partners. Sign up at heymax.ai now to get a 1,000 Max Miles head start. Turn your daily transactions into dream vacations. Your business can also leverage the highly cost-efficient and desirable loyalty currency called Max Miles that has no expiry, no fees, and instantly one-to-one transferable to 24 airlines and hotels to acquire new customers and drive repeat sales with no integration required. Reach out to Joe at heymax.ai and mention Brave to uplevel your rewards game and reduce your cost. I love sci-fi. I got to read a fantastic book that blew my mind over the past year, which opened up a new dimension of thought. The book is called There Is No Anti-Memetics Division, which talks about a secret unit that is hunting down things that are called cognitohazards. Cognitohazard is a fascinating word. It is composed of 2 words, cognition and hazard. So cognition is the mental process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and senses. And hazard means something that is dangerous to your physical and mental self. Therefore, cognitohazard is a form of process or idea that upon comprehension creates danger to yourself. A simple example would be a strobe light that triggers epilepsy. So for somebody who's vulnerable to flashing lights of certain colors, to see a light does not immediately trigger it, but to comprehend that trigger, your brain subconsciously reacts to it and triggers an epilepsy episode. In contrast, a laser that's pointed at your eye will cause blindness because it directly causes harm to your retina, but it is not the same because it's not processed by the brain. I want to share about 3 different types of real-life cognitive hazards that happen in the real life. The first type of cognitive hazard is really about content that induces depression or increases the likelihood of suicide. What is well known is that if you have an individual who is vulnerable, for example, feeling alone, socially disconnected, showing them graphic violence or self-harm content can trigger similar behaviors in these individuals. An in-person example of this is that it is well reported that there are suicide clusters in schools. For example, if a student commits suicide in a school, there's often a replication of copycat incidents where more suicides will happen because of 2 things. One is that fellow students hear about a suicide and are sad about this entire process and feel sad about the loss of life. Secondly, the knowledge that suicide is a path out for sadness creates a sort of social contagion where it becomes an acceptable form of behavior because somebody else has already done it. Thirdly, if there is a copycat suicide, it can continue self-perpetuated because it becomes much more of a norm rather than an aberration. As a result, the school best practice today is that after a child commits suicide or has attempted suicide, that they activate counselors and do a lot of active intervention to prevent further incidents. The media all across the world are now very careful about reporting about school suicides in order to prevent social contagion. This is called the Werther effect. This can not only happen in school systems, it can also happen in a tight community, or for example, it can even happen nationally after a celebrity suicide wave. As a result, the World Health Organization has worked with reporters to create the following guidelines. First of all, to use extreme restraint in covering suicidal deaths In other words, to keep the word suicide out of the headline. Number 2, to not romanticize the death. And 3, limit the number of stories, including photography, pictures, and visual images of film. The second type of cognitohazard would be school shootings and self-radicalization. It has now been studied that extensive coverage of school shootings can inspire copycat attacks. These attackers often write manifestos, publicize their attacks, and even seek to live stream their attacks. Extremists can also seek to radicalize individuals by promoting and inspiring individuals to themselves become extremists and to propagate the same content. For example, in Singapore, a 16-year-old Singaporean student of Chinese ethnicity was self-radicalized by online content to become a white supremacist. He came upon videos by the American far-right personality Paul Nicholas Miller, who is known for promoting a race war and espouses white supremacist and neo-Nazi rhetoric. As a result, the teenager, upon perceiving this information and absorbing it, developed an intense hatred of communities typically targeted by far-right extremists, including African Americans, Arabs, and LGBTQ individuals. He came to believe that African Americans were quote-unquote responsible for a significant percentage of crime in the United States and deserved to die a horrible death. He also perceived illegal Arab immigrants as having committed violent acts against white populations in Western countries. What is fascinating is that he felt that he had no plans to conduct any attacks locally, as he felt that these communities had not caused any trouble in Singapore. However, he shared his interest to travel to America in 10 years' time to conduct a mass shooting. If you think about it, it's quite bonkers that a teenager of Chinese ethnicity identifies as a white supremacist. On one hand, it shows the extent of how vulnerable the youth and teenagers can be. On the other hand, it also shows the power of cognitohazards. The third example of cognitohazards was the Tylenol poisoning case. In 1982, Tylenol bottles in America were tampered with and had cyanide entered into the bottles, therefore causing multiple deaths. At that time, the headlines caused mass panic, and many people were exposed to this method. Unfortunately, the public absorption of this information created hundreds of copycat attacks, including Tylenol and other over-the-counter medications and other products. This was only stopped when the pharma industry worked on better packaging security, tamper-resistant seals, and legal reforms. I watched a fascinating video by the MMA fighter GSP. He shared his strategy to mentally overload the opponent. He would conduct feints, deceptive movements, and constant pressure to exhaust the opponent mentally, because the opponent's nervous system would be overloaded, reacting to all kinds of different signals that could or could not be the proper attack vector. This reminds me very much of social media algorithm feeds, where shorts content, even though they're individually okay to absorb, when there is an overdose, for example, you're looking at not just 1 or 10 shots, but you're looking at them for 1, 2, 4, 8 hours in a row, it can cause mental fatigue and anxiety because your body's nervous system gets overloaded. What I'm trying to say here is that the continuous exposure to sensational news and content can overload our cognitive systems. In other words, a small dose of social media is not a cognitohazard, but taking too much of it creates a poisonous effect. As a result, it's important for us to be aware that such a phrase, cognitohazards, becomes, because it helps us navigate the modern information landscape more safely. We all know that we are what we eat. If we eat healthy, then we have a healthy body. If we eat unhealthy or drink poison, then we become unhealthy. We do have to be thoughtful about information diets, and we need to eat more of the healthy content out there and limit our exposure to potentially harmful content. On that note, see you next time. Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.